Dr. Maya Johnson stood at the entrance of the grand conference hall, her heart racing with a tumult of emotions. The air buzzed with anticipation as researchers and scientists from around the globe convened for the annual International Conference on Renewable Energy. Maya adjusted her glasses and took a deep breath, reminding herself of the countless hours spent in the lab perfecting her research. This was her moment, the culmination of years of hard work, and yet an undercurrent of anxiety threatened to drown her excitement. As she stepped inside, the opulence of the venue was overwhelming. Gleaming chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting a warm glow over the sea of attendees, each engrossed in their conversations. Maya's gaze drifted to the clusters of her peers, their laughter ringing like distant bells. She couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. Whispers fluttered around her like moths to a flame, snatches of conversation punctuated by snickers and sidelong glances. "Can you believe she's presenting?" a voice said, barely above a whisper, yet loud enough for Maya to hear. "I mean, how could someone like her possibly lead in such a complex field?" Maya clenched her fists, the sting of those words igniting a fire within her. She had grown accustomed to the skepticism. The world of academia was rife with prejudice, and as an African-American woman in science, she had faced her share of challenges. Yet here she was on the brink of sharing her groundbreaking discovery with the world. "Dr. Johnson," a voice cut through her thoughts. It was Dr. Henry Wells, a renowned scientist known for his brash demeanor. He approached her with an air of superiority, his eyes scanning her with a hint of condescension. "I hope you're prepared for the scrutiny. This isn't a classroom presentation. It's an international stage." Maya forced a smile, masking her unease. "I appreciate the advice, Dr. Wells. I believe my research speaks for itself." "Oh, I'm sure it does," he replied, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Just remember, it's not just about the data. It's about how you present it. You might want to work on your delivery. Some people just won't take you seriously otherwise." As he walked away, Maya felt a wave of humiliation wash over her. Doubt gnawed at her, but she refused to let it take root. She had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to turn back now. With a steely resolve, she made her way to the podium, her notes clutched tightly in her hands. The moment she stepped into the spotlight, the room fell silent. A sea of faces turned towards her, some curious, others skeptical. Maya cleared her throat, the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Maya Johnson, and today I will be presenting my research on a revolutionary approach to renewable energy, one that could significantly improve energy efficiency and sustainability." As she spoke, the initial flicker of interest in the crowd began to wane. Maya noticed Dr. Wells whispering to a colleague, both of them stifling laughter. The condescension in their eyes was palpable. "Are you suggesting that your untested theories could outperform decades of established research?" Dr. Wells interjected, his voice slicing through her presentation like a knife. "Forgive me, but it's quite audacious for someone with your background to claim such an advancement." The room shifted uncomfortably, and Maya's heart dropped. She felt the heat rising to her cheeks, but the fire in her belly burned brighter. "Science is not defined by background, Dr. Wells, but by evidence and innovation. I believe my findings demonstrate a viable path forward." The tension in the room crackled like static. Maya pressed on, determined to finish her presentation despite the obstacles. However, the seed of doubt that Dr. Wells had planted lingered in the back of her mind, threatening to overshadow her conviction. Once the presentation concluded, she stepped down from the podium, feeling an overwhelming sense of vulnerability wash over her. The clapping was polite, but the whispers resumed, more pronounced now. Maya retreated to her hotel room, her sanctuary away from the prying eyes and judgmental voices. She sank onto the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the wall as memories flooded her mind. Images of her journey flashed before her, the late nights spent in the lab, the dismissive remarks from peers, and the unyielding pressure to prove herself. The systemic racism and sexism had been a constant backdrop to her academic life, a reminder that she had to work twice as hard to earn half the recognition. Yet, in that moment of solitude, a fire ignited within her. She would not let their doubts define her. She would rise, not just for herself, but for every person who had been told they weren't enough. With renewed determination, Maya picked up her laptop and began to draft her next steps. She would harness her pain and transform it into power. This was far from over. Maya Johnson sat at her lab bench, the dim light of the overhead lamp illuminating her determined expression. The late hours had become her sanctuary, a space where the noise of skepticism faded into a quiet hum of potential. With stacks of research papers and her trusty laptop before her, she meticulously reviewed her data, her heart racing with the thrill of discovery. Just days after her presentation, she had stumbled upon something extraordinary, a unique process that could significantly enhance energy efficiency. Her mind raced with possibilities as she adjusted her glasses and jotted down calculations in her notebook. "If I can just refine this further," she murmured to herself, her voice barely above a whisper. The numbers danced across the screen, taunting her with their complexity, yet promising a breakthrough that could change the course of renewable energy research. As she worked, the door to the lab creaked open. It was Marcus, her old friend and an engineer who had always believed in her. "Burning the midnight oil again, Maya," he teased, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Can't help it, Marcus. I think I'm onto something big," she replied, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "If I can perfect this process, it could increase efficiency by at least 30%. "Wow, that's huge. Have you told anyone else?" Maya shook her head, a frown replacing her smile. "Not yet. I need to ensure it's solid before I share it. I know Dr. Wells and his team are already dismissing my work. They're not going to take me seriously unless I have undeniable proof." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "Let them doubt. You just keep pushing forward. You're doing amazing work here." Maya appreciated his support, but the sting of the conference lingered in her thoughts. Dr. Henry Wells had dismissed her theories almost as if they were a personal affront. A woman of color leading in science? Preposterous, he had sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. The more he belittled her, the more her resolve solidified. Meanwhile, across town, Dr. Wells and his team were gathered in their sleek conference room, surrounded by charts and graphs. He leaned back in his chair, a smug smile on his face as he addressed his colleagues. "We've reviewed Maya's findings, and quite frankly, they lack the rigor we expect from our research. We should stick to the traditional methods." His assistant, Laura, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "But Dr. Wells, she did present some interesting data. Interesting doesn't cut it. We're not here to entertain wild theories. We need results, not speculation." His tone was sharp, leaving no room for debate. He waved his hand dismissively, signaling the end of the conversation. Back in her lab, Maya could feel the weight of their dismissal, almost as if their scorn had traveled through the air to her. Yet, instead of succumbing to despair, she grew more determined. She adjusted her focus, diving deeper into her research, poring over every detail, late into the night. But just when the culmination of her hard work was within reach, she faced a devastating setback. One evening, after a long day of experiments, she returned to her lab to find the door ajar. Her heart sank as she stepped inside, her worst fears confirmed. Papers were strewn across the floor, her equipment was disheveled, and her computer was missing. "No, no, no," she gasped, rushing forward, her mind racing. "Not my data." In a panic, she scanned the room, her thoughts swirling. Who would do this? Had someone from the conference targeted her? A sick feeling settled in her stomach as she recalled Dr. Wells's disdainful remarks. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her voice trembling. Maya quickly grabbed her phone and dialed Marcus. "I need your help. My lab has been vandalized. Some of my research data is missing." "On my way," he replied, urgency lacing his tone. As she waited, Maya paced the floor, grappling with the implications of the theft. This wasn't just a loss of material. It was an affront to her integrity as a scientist. She could feel the shadows of doubt creeping in, but she resolved not to let them take hold. She would uncover the truth, no matter what it took. When Marcus arrived, he surveyed the chaos in the lab, his expression darkening. "This is bad, Maya. We need to report it. No, she said, shaking her head vigorously. I can't let them see me as a victim. I need to figure out who did this first. All right, he conceded, his brow furrowing. But we need a plan. Let's gather what evidence we can and see if there's any way to recover your data. Maya nodded, feeling a flicker of hope ignite within her. She might have been underestimated, but she was far from defeated. With renewed determination, she set to work alongside Marcus, ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. Maya sat across from Dr. Lisa Chun in the university cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the sweet scent of pastries. Despite the bustling environment, her focus was entirely on her mentor. Lisa, a seasoned scientist with silver-streaked hair and a warm smile, leaned forward, her eyes filled with concern. Maya, I know this setback feels monumental, Lisa began, her voice steady. But you have to remember why you started this journey. Your research is groundbreaking. Maya sighed, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. I thought I was finally making a difference. But after the vandalism, it feels like all my work has been thrown into chaos. And Dr. Wells? He seems determined to crush me at every turn. Lisa shook her head vigorously. You're not alone in this, Maya. You have a network of colleagues who admire your work. You just need to reach out to them. They can help you gather support and resources. Don't let his fear dictate your path. Maya took a deep breath, absorbing Lisa's words. You're right. I can't let him win. I need to focus on what really matters, the science. Exactly, Lisa encouraged, her expression softening. You've poured your heart into this. Let that passion drive you. Remember, resilience is often born from adversity. Use this moment to fuel your determination. Refreshed by the conversation, Maya left the cafe with a renewed sense of purpose. She returned to her lab, the familiar scent of chemicals and the hum of machinery grounding her. As she began organizing her notes, she felt a surge of energy. She needed to reclaim her narrative and prove her research's validity. Later that evening, Maya received a message from a fellow researcher, Dr. Samira Patel. Maya, I heard about what happened. I'm here if you need to talk or brainstorm. Let's meet. Maya smiled, grateful for the support. Thanks, Samira. I could definitely use your insight. Let's meet tomorrow. The next day, the two women gathered in Maya's lab, surrounded by the remnants of her hard work. So, what's the latest? Samira asked, pulling up a chair. I've been trying to piece everything back together. I have an idea for a new experiment that could validate my findings, but I need to analyze the data I managed to save. I suspect Dr. Wells is behind the sabotage, and I need to prove it, Maya replied, her voice filled with determination. Samira raised an eyebrow. If you think he's responsible, we should gather proof. I know a few people in the department who can help us dig deeper. We can't let him tarnish your reputation. Maya nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie. I appreciate that. I want to confront him with evidence, but first, I need to ensure my research stands on its own. As days turned into weeks, Maya and her network of supporters worked tirelessly. They analyzed data, collaborated on new experiments, and shared insights, building a foundation of trust and encouragement. One evening, as Maya reviewed the results of a new simulation, her heart raced. The numbers were promising. Samira, look at this, she exclaimed, pointing at the screen. If we can replicate these results, it could enhance energy efficiency by 30%. Samira's eyes widened in excitement. This is incredible. We need to prepare for the peer review. If we can get this published, Dr. Wells won't have a leg to stand on. But beneath the excitement, Maya felt a nagging doubt. What if he finds a way to undermine this too? I can't keep living in fear of his influence. Then let's take the fight to him, Samira replied fiercely. We're going to make sure your work is recognized for its true value. For every attempt he makes to sabotage, we'll counter it with transparency and collaboration. As the days passed, Maya's anxiety transformed into fierce determination. She began compiling her findings, meticulously documenting every experiment and result. The support from her peers fortified her resolve, and she felt a sense of empowerment that had eluded her for so long. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya stood in her lab, surrounded by her colleagues. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. "This is our moment," she declared, her voice resolute. "We're not just proving my theory. We're standing against the prejudice that has tried to silence my voice. We'll show them that science knows no color, no gender. We will rise together." Her colleagues nodded, a chorus of agreement filling the room. Maya's heart swelled with pride, knowing she had forged a community that believed in her. The feeling of unity fueled her resolve to reclaim her narrative and track down the stolen data, igniting a fierce determination within her. She was ready to face Dr. Wells and the challenges ahead, armed not only with her groundbreaking research, but also with the unwavering support of those who believed in her. As the fluorescent lights of the lab flickered above, Maya Johnson felt a surge of determination mingled with anxiety. The recent invasion of her workspace weighed heavily on her mind, but she had no intention of letting it deter her. She had enlisted the help of her old friend Marcus, a tech-savvy investigator with a knack for uncovering hidden truths. Together, they delved into the mystery of the stolen data. "Did you find anything?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as she peered over Marcus's shoulder, watching him navigate through files on a sleek laptop. "Just give me a second," he replied, his fingers dancing over the keyboard. "I'm checking the security footage from the cameras we installed." He paused, a glint of excitement flashing in his eyes. "You're not going to believe this." Maya leaned closer, her heart racing. The screen flickered, and suddenly an image appeared, a grainy video of her lab. She watched intently as the footage played back, her breath hitching in her throat. The timestamp indicated that it was the night of the incident. Moments later, a shadowy figure entered the frame, moving deliberately toward her workstation. "There!" Marcus pointed at the screen. "That has to be the person who vandalized your lab." Maya squinted, trying to make out the details. "I can't see their face," she muttered, frustration creeping into her voice. "Wait for it," Marcus urged, his eyes glued to the screen. The figure paused, glancing around the lab before rummaging through her files. As they continued to watch, the figure turned slightly, and for a fleeting moment, Maya caught a glimpse of the person's distinctive jacket. "Is that?" she began, her voice trailing off in disbelief. "Dr. Wells," Marcus confirmed, his brow furrowing. "Looks like we have our saboteur." Maya felt a mix of disbelief and anger wash over her. "He's been undermining my work this whole time," she said, her fists clenched tightly at her sides. "This isn't just about competition. This is personal. Let's gather the evidence and take it to the panel," Marcus suggested, his tone both supportive and determined. "You need to confront him with this." As the days passed, Maya continued her experiments, pushing herself harder than ever. Despite the turmoil, there were moments of self-doubt that crept in during the long hours alone in the lab. She often found herself staring at the results of her research, wondering if she was truly on the right path. But each time the doubt swirled, she remembered the faces of her supporters, Dr. Lisa Chun, her mentor, her friends from the conference, and even Marcus, who believed in her when so many others did not. One afternoon, as she meticulously prepared her data for the upcoming presentation, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Dr. Chun. "Asterisk Maya, I believe in you. Your research has the potential to change the world. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Asterisk, the words ignited a fire within her, and Maya felt her resolve strengthen. She meticulously organized her findings, ensuring that everything was clear and concise. She would present not only her groundbreaking research, but also the evidence of sabotage. It was time for her voice to be heard. On the day of the presentation, Maya entered the panel room, her heart racing with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The atmosphere was thick with tension as she noticed Dr. Wells seated among the esteemed panelists, his demeanor arrogant as ever. Maya took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "Today, I will present my findings on the revolutionary advancements we can achieve in renewable energy efficiency." As she spoke, she could feel Dr. Wells's eyes boring into her, his disdain palpable. But she pressed on, detailing her research with passion and clarity. Each word was laced with the determination of every moment she had fought for her place in the scientific community. And as part of my presentation, she continued, her voice growing stronger, I have evidence regarding the recent incidents that have compromised my work. She paused, allowing her words to sink in, and pointed to the screen behind her, which displayed the footage Marcus had uncovered. The room fell silent, and she could feel the weight of their gazes resting on her. This video clearly shows Dr. Wells entering my lab without permission, tampering with my data. Dr. Wells shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his irritation evident. This is preposterous. You can't seriously believe that this footage is credible, he blurted, attempting to dismiss her claims with a wave of his hand. Maya stood tall, her heart pounding, but she wouldn't back down. I do believe it, and I have the support of my colleagues and mentors who can attest to my character and the integrity of my research. The tension in the room thickened as the panelists exchanged glances, some appearing intrigued while others looked skeptical. But Maya felt a newfound strength coursing through her. She was ready to fight, for her work, for herself, and for all those who had been marginalized in the pursuit of knowledge. The moment was charged with possibility, and as she continued her presentation, she knew that whatever the outcome, she had already begun to reclaim her narrative. The battle wasn't over, but she was prepared to face whatever lay ahead with unwavering resolve. Maya stood before the panel, her heart hammering in her chest, the air thick with anticipation. The room, once filled with whispers of doubt, was now silent as the esteemed scientists processed the data she had just presented. The results were staggering, illuminating the potential of her innovative approach to renewable energy. It was everything she had worked for, the culmination of late nights, tireless research, and unwavering determination. As she concluded her presentation, a palpable energy filled the room. Dr. Wells, seated at the far end of the long table, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His expression was a mixture of annoyance and disbelief, as if he was grappling with the reality that Maya's work could overshadow his own. Dr. Johnson, one of the panelists, a distinguished woman with glasses perched on her nose, began, "Your findings are truly groundbreaking. The implications for energy efficiency are enormous. How do you foresee this impacting the current industry standards?" Maya felt a surge of pride swell within her. "Thank you, Dr. Patel. My research not only demonstrates a significant increase in energy output, but also highlights a sustainable approach that could reduce our carbon footprint substantially. I believe this could catalyze a shift in how we approach renewable energy sources." The panel members exchanged impressed glances, nodding in agreement. Maya noted the shift in their demeanor, the realization that they were witnessing something extraordinary. But before she could bask in the moment, Dr. Wells cleared his throat, his voice dripping with condescension. "While your results are intriguing, Dr. Johnson," he began, his tone dismissive, "we must consider the possibility of error in your methodology. Such a radical shift in energy efficiency requires rigorous validation. It's essential that we remain grounded in established practices." The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension in the air. Maya could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, a familiar mixture of anger and determination surging within her. She had anticipated this reaction from Dr. Wells, but the stakes were too high to let his condescension slide. "Dr. Wells," Maya said, her voice steady but resolute, "I understand the value of established practices, but innovation often requires us to challenge the status quo. My research has undergone extensive peer review, and I stand by its validity. If we don't push boundaries, we risk stagnation." Dr. Wells opened his mouth to retort, but before he could articulate his thoughts, another panelist interjected. "Let's not overlook the potential for collaboration here. Dr. Johnson, how can we work together to further investigate these findings?" Maya seized the opportunity, her mind racing with possibilities. "I would be thrilled to collaborate. I believe that by combining our resources and expertise, we can expedite the validation process and implement these findings on a larger scale." As discussions began to swirl around her, Maya felt a sense of empowerment. She was no longer the underdog. She was a force to be reckoned with. The panelists were genuinely engaging with her work, and for the first time, she sensed that they were beginning to see her as an equal, not just an outsider. However, the moment was not without its shadows. Maya turned her gaze back to Dr. Wells, who was now visibly irritated. The battle lines were drawn, and she felt an unshakable need to confront him about the sabotage that had marred her journey. "Dr. Wells," Maya said, her voice firm, drawing the attention of the room, "I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. Your attempts to undermine my work have not gone unnoticed. I deserve to know why you felt the need to sabotage my research instead of engaging in constructive dialogue." A murmur swept across the audience, the tension thickening as all eyes turned to Dr. Wells, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He opened his mouth, hesitating, as disbelief flickered in his eyes. "What are you implying, Dr. Johnson?" he managed, his bravado wavering. "I'm implying that the hidden camera footage from my lab reveals the truth of your actions," she stated, her voice unwavering. "You chose to undermine my work out of fear and prejudice. It's time for accountability." The panelists leaned forward, captivated by the unfolding confrontation. Whispers of support began to ripple through the crowd, each voice adding to the momentum of Maya's courage. She had transformed from an underestimated scientist into a beacon of resilience, defying the very prejudices that sought to hold her back. "Let's ensure that this is addressed appropriately," one of the panelists said, looking towards the others with a sense of urgency. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the thrill of confrontation and the hope of change. Maya felt a surge of adrenaline. She had stepped into her power, and there was no turning back now. The room buzzed with anticipation, and she could finally see the seeds of respect being sown in the eyes of her peers. As the press conference began, the room buzzed with anticipation. Journalists shuffled their papers, cameras adjusted their angles, and scientists whispered amongst themselves, anxious to hear Dr. Maya Johnson's next move. Standing at the podium, Maya felt a mix of adrenaline and resolve coursing through her veins. She glanced at Dr. Henry Wells sitting in the front row, his expression a mask of arrogance, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Today was not just about her research. It was about justice. "Thank you all for being here," Maya began, her voice steady and clear. "Today, I want to share not just my findings, but the truth about the lengths some will go to undermine progress." With that, she clicked a button on the remote, and the screen behind her flickered to life, displaying the logo of her research institute. The footage began to play, revealing a grainy but unmistakable image of Dr. Wells entering her lab late at night, the scene illuminated by a dim light. Gasps filled the room as her colleagues watched intently, recognizing the familiar face of the man they had once held in high regard. Maya continued narrating the events captured on the tape, her heart racing as she detailed the moments of sabotage. The moments when he had tampered with her work, stolen her data, and conspired to discredit her. "Dr. Wells believed he could erase my contributions," she declared, her voice gaining strength with each word. "But this footage is proof of his actions, and it highlights the systemic issues we face in the scientific community. We must do better." The atmosphere shifted. Journalists' pens flew across notepads, and murmurs of disbelief echoed throughout the audience. Dr. Wells shifted uncomfortably in his seat, a flush creeping up his neck. "This is absurd," he finally shouted, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "You can't just present hearsay as evidence." Maya stood her ground, unyielding. "This is not hearsay, Dr. Wells. This is the reality of what happened. Your attempts to silence me only amplify the need for transparency and accountability in our field." The tension in the room was palpable as her words hung in the air, igniting a fire within many who had witnessed her struggle. As the press conference concluded, the fallout from her revelations was swift and severe. News outlets exploded with headlines, the scientific community rallied in support of Maya, and Dr. Wells found himself at the center of a scandal. Institutional leaders called for investigations into his conduct, and he was stripped of his accolades, his reputation shattered. Meanwhile, Maya was approached by numerous journalists eager to share her story. "Dr. Johnson," one reporter asked, "how does it feel to finally be recognized for your hard work?" Maya smiled, a sense of peace washing over her. It's not just about recognition. It's about paving the way for others who face similar challenges. We need to create a space where everyone can thrive, regardless of their background. In the weeks that followed, Maya's research gained traction, and her groundbreaking findings were published in prestigious journals. She became a symbol of resilience and hope, inspiring young scientists, especially women and people of color, to pursue their dreams fiercely. Then came the announcement that would change everything for her. She was awarded a prestigious grant from a leading energy organization, one that would fund her research for the next 5 years. Maya couldn't believe it. As she stood on the stage, accepting the award, she took a moment to reflect on her journey, the struggles, the doubts, and ultimately, the triumph. "Today is not just a victory for me," she addressed the audience, her voice filled with emotion. "It's a victory for everyone who has ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed." Let this be a reminder that perseverance can lead to breakthrough moments, not just in science, but in all aspects of life. As the applause resonated through the auditorium, Maya felt a swell of gratitude for her community, her mentor Dr. Lisa Chun, and even the struggles she had faced. They had all contributed to this moment, the moment when she transformed adversity into a powerful catalyst for change. She looked out at the sea of faces, each one reflecting a glimmer of hope, and she knew her journey was far from over. She had not only reclaimed her narrative, but had also opened doors for countless others.